Thanks for having me, Cait, and I'm so glad for everyone to be able to join and happy to share and do whatever I can to make this beneficial for you all and a great way to spend your time today. So thank you. So I don't see much in the group chat. I just see one message from you, Cait, but just for logistics, are we just going to use that for questions? We won't have any live discussion?
So we've been using the group chat in the past and it's been working really well. If our group remains around this size, we can open it up to live discussion and go from there. So let's start with the chat and see how it goes.
That sounds great. So one of the things that I want to just do to open things up, I'm happy to share just a little bit about myself and then to talk about, like you said, Cait, this helpful tool called the Circle of Control that you may or may not be aware of, but it's super instructive during time like this. And then I want to leave enough time to really just ad lib based on your questions or anything you have. And I'd like to do, if there's time at the end, a little bit of research with you all, because I'm thinking about repurposing some of my time during the downtime to do some ideation around writing a book. And the book is about something that I think you all can really help me with. So I'm hoping that I can do a little bit of data gathering with you all to help me out as well. But just to tell you briefly about myself, I am a two-time graduate of VCU and love it and love to be able to come back and be with students. I have degrees in psychology and interior design, and I have had a lot of career chapters based on those two majors and being somewhat opportunistic throughout my career. But in a nutshell, my career involved a lot of time working for a large company and then, or a couple of large companies, and then interspersed by smaller amounts of time working for myself. And that's really what my book project is going to be about, which we can get to later. But my career in corporate life was really around, I did a lot around human resources. I did a long stint in recruiting, so I know a good amount about recruiting and hiring practices, although it has been a few years. I think some of that really never goes away, that core knowledge that I have about hiring people. And I also worked in organizational change management, and I did a lot of other sort of training and development type roles. I designed classes and I taught classes in the corporate world. And in my last few years in the corporate world, I learned about design thinking and human-centered design, if you've heard of those terms, and product strategy. And I really fell in love with that. By the way, I also had a brief stint being interior designer in the midst of all this. And that's one of my chapters, as I like to talk about it. But the reason I fell in love with human-centered design and design thinking is, for me, it was a perfect blending of creativity and strategy. It's very intellectually satisfying and creative at the same time. And so after doing that in a large organization for a few years, I decided I want to do this across industries and with different groups of people and different companies. And I don't want to limit myself to working in just one company where I just have one slice of that experience. And so I started my own company. It'll be 3 years ago in October. And it really was to do human-centered design with different types of organizations and industries and populations, and really find my bliss within that. And where do I belong? So that means that I help teams anywhere from like the earliest startup to a very established organization, and right now everything in between. I help them figure out how to launch a new product or service and how to do it in a way that can make them more successful by managing the risks around starting new products and services. And oftentimes that means connecting your new product and service to customer needs that are unsatisfied. So I really enjoy that. I have made good on my promise to myself to work in different industries, everything from a lipstick startup to working for Veterans Affairs and the federal government, and pretty much everything in between. And I think over time, I'll probably narrow my focus. I'm really interested in healthcare innovation. I'm interested in social innovation, but I think I'll get there over time. And in the short term, I'm pretty much working with anyone who will pay me, especially as we get through this time. And it's my job to work on my business as well as in my business. So as an entrepreneur, I've really had to realize that it's not just about me being the best elite consultant that I can be, but I also have to learn how to sell my services and get people to buy my services, which has been an enormous learning curve and something I never had to do before. So that is a little bit about my journey in no particular order. Do we want to stop there for questions, Cait, or do you want me to launch into the circle of control?
Does anyone have any questions? We'll pause for a moment and see anything that Holly shared so far that you want to hear more about. Okay, so yes, we have one here. How do you become more comfortable with selling your product or ideas to potential customers? You mentioned that a big learning curve for you, or just a big time of growth, has been marketing yourself and getting out there. So could you address that question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Alexander, for the question. It has definitely been a great question. And I think it's such an important one because, at least in my circle of acquaintances and friends and contacts, it's one of the biggest reasons why people don't go into business for themselves, because they are uncomfortable selling their product and ideas to potential customers. And I won't say that I figured it all out, but I will say, first of all, it's a process and it doesn't happen overnight. And like anything else, you're probably going to be bad at it before you're good at it, and be okay with that. At first, I kicked myself and I would say, I messed this up and I messed that up. And oh my gosh, I just squandered an opportunity. But the bottom line is sometimes that's the only way that we can be good, is by making mistakes first. So be gentle with yourself through that process. And I've learned to do that. I've had some really painful experiences. Like I have had people say like, wow, you don't sell yourself well. And I had to be like, what, me? You know, like, and because I thought that by focusing on the work and what I knew I was really good at, that, you know, I was selling myself. And I also have had to get over the notion that somehow it cheapens what I'm doing by selling myself. So these are psychological barriers that I put in front of myself that that we all might have to some degree. Because the fact of the matter is, most of us never learn about how to sell in school, right? We just don't pick that skill set up. So I think there are a few of us who are really lucky and come to it naturally, but the rest of us need to get comfortable. So for me, it's been listening to a lot of podcasts, reading books, just making it a focus and really taking on the attitude like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I am going to figure this challenge out, and being really tenacious about it. I trick myself. So sometimes I like think of it as a fishing game, and I kind of think of it as like, I'm going to put out a lot of fishing rods from a sales perspective, and then hopefully I will catch a fish. And so I make it into a game like that. And then finally I got help. You know, I started reaching out to friends and family and contacts, and I got connected with someone who, she actually teaches right now in the business school. Her name's Cait, and she has a background in sales. She comes to it really naturally, and I hired her to help me. And she helped me with a couple things. One was just to kind of get over some unhelpful thoughts that I had about selling, and then replace those with more structured, helpful mindsets around selling. And then she actually taught me some specific skills. So for example, if I was going on vacation and someone before had said, hey, like, I really want to hire you next week, and I knew I was on vacation, I would just be like, oh, you know, I'm on vacation, so you'll have to talk to me after that. And she helped me rethink my script on some of that. So it was more like, wow, I'm going to be working remotely from another place next week. And some things like that, that made it more seamless and kept the sales process going. One other little nugget that I'll share is, it's a very simple one, but it's not something I would have come to myself, which is, she said, don't ever leave a meeting without getting the next meeting on the books with a client. And I had heard this a bunch of times, but it just takes a long time for it to sink in. And so now, almost no matter what, when I'm meeting with a client, it's not that uncomfortable for me to say anymore, because I've done it so many times. Like, look, we're both together. We have our calendars open. Like, let's just grab another meeting now and it's on the calendar. And that way we don't hang up. And you all know what it's like when you hang up that phone. You may never contact that person again. But when you have that meeting on the calendar, there's something psychologically, it's a lot less easy to cancel it. It's probably going to happen, and you're going to keep that momentum moving forward with that client.
Great, thanks. And I think that, you know, listening to that path as an entrepreneur, getting new business and getting new clients, I'm seeing a lot of parallels with a job search. And so a lot of it's about that time of year where summer internships are typically the next step. We're in a different situation right now with working remotely and having to be creative. Students are needing to be creative with the opportunities that they're seeking. And so I think two of the things that you said, the fishing game, really trying to find that, make it fun, try to find that motivation, try to keep that energy going, even in the midst of some dead ends, quite frankly, could be really helpful right now to think of it in that perspective. And then also you mentioned that, you know, it got to a point where you asked for help. And so we have you here as a mentor in our mentoring program. And I think it's a great, I'm going to use this for a plug for our informational interviews in our mentor network, that we have so many mentors and alum and business partners with VCU at your disposal if you're a student on this call. And so as you think about how to navigate this time, feel free to reach out to them and just talk. And it can be it doesn't have to be a high pressure situation, but you could likely pick their brain and get some different perspectives there. So Holly, I'd love for you to talk about the circle of control that we were chatting about a little earlier.
Yeah.
And for us to go there.
Let me share an article that I wrote on LinkedIn, and it's a pretty not very beautiful diagram, but this is an article that I wrote on LinkedIn about circle of control, and I was like, oh, I'll just kind of walk you all through it. But it's a simple technique for taking you from chaotic to calm. And really I wrote it because I think I mentioned earlier that part of my corporate journey was working in organizational change management. And that was really helping organizations work through large changes. And we all know this is like a massive change. It's very disruptive to our lives on so many levels. I don't even think for many of us it's sinking in, but every day there's something else that sinks in. And we all know it's a grieving process and it can be very overwhelming. And so this is a tool that I used to use during that time that was very beneficial. And here's a little bit about how it works. So, and it's a framework, right? It's not a magic bullet, but what it does is it gives you a way to think about what you're going through and hopefully get to be a little bit more calm and productive through these difficult times. So and I didn't make this up. This comes from a book called 7 Habits of Highly Productive People. I think that's the name of it. 7 Habits for short, and you can look it up. I think the author is Stephen Covey. But the idea is that we all have 3 circles in our lives, according to this framework. And the largest one is a circle of concern. And that's everything that we're worried about right now, right? It's all the stuff that's out there, and you can think about all the dimensions. It might be what's going to happen to me, my job search, what's going to happen to my family. Are they going to stay healthy? Am I going to stay healthy? What's happening in our government? What's happening in our world? What's happening in our economy? My guess is we're all thinking about these quite a lot. So we're concerned with them, right? And they're out there, and they cause a lot of grief and worry and anxiety. So then the next circle in is a circle of influence. And those are the things that they're a little bit less abstract. And so in my circle of influence, for example, might be my mom. She's older. I want to make sure that since she's in a population of people that we believe, can get more sick with COVID-19, I want to try to influence her to not go to the store, right? Or not go out of the house more than she needs to, or be extremely careful when she does. And so I consider my relationship with my mom to be within my circle of influence, but I can't control her. but I have more influence over her actions than I would over, for example, our national government right now. I'm probably not going to write an email to Fauci or to Trump or anything like that, and they're not going to get it, right? Like, that might be my concern, but I don't have really any influence over that. But my circle of influence, I do. And there's a variety of people. Like, maybe I can influence our local leaders. Maybe there are others in our community that I might have influence with, you know? It really just depends. And I probably can influence my mom. I don't have any kids. I could probably influence my kids if I did. But it's those people that maybe I can influence, or scenarios that I can influence, that are under the circle of influence. Another example might be, I can put a sign on my window that says, hey, everyone, stay home or wear a mask, right? I'm trying to influence my community, but I really can't control them, but they are going to walk by my house and see something. And then we have the innermost circle, which is the circle of control. And those are things you absolutely do control. They're completely within your control. So let's think about what those things are. So it's things like my choices. It might be things like, to a certain degree, what I eat in a day, right? Yes, it's somewhat circumscribed by what's in my kitchen, but, or what I decide to take out, but how I respond to the day's events, how I invest in my relationships or my marriage right now is within my control. How well I take care of myself through exercise is in my direct control. So these are some examples. So you have that circle of control, which is everything you can control through your actions, responses, and reactions and choices in our lives. The circle of influence, where you can start to work on that to have influence over a larger domain. And then the circle of concern. So now, how do you use this model once you know about it? That's really where I think the magic happens. It's really about managing your energy and managing your time. And so if I spend all of my mental energy in my circle of concern, I'm going to be really frustrated and probably distressed, and probably not being able to cause a lot of positive change in my life. And we only have a certain amount of energy day in and day out. And we want it to go someplace, even if we're in a pandemic. We want, most of us, I think, want to be working towards something or investing our time in something positive. And so I might want to limit how much time I spend on the news or on Twitter or something like that if I find that I get it a little bit out of control or upset because I'm spending a ton of my energy on circle of concern. Circle of influence, I can spend a little bit more time because the investment could possibly pay back depending on what it is that I'm doing. And then the circle of control, I want to spend a lot of time there because I'm actually able to move the needle, and my energy is going to pay off a lot more if I focus on the things that I can control. And so, and I'm happy to send a link to this article, but basically, I'll stop in a couple minutes for your questions if there are any, but it kind of goes into what we talked about it just as a review here. So the innermost circle, it's utterly within your purview. You can do something about it. The influence, you can have some sway, but not total. And then the circle of concern is you can have very minimal ability to influence. And so there's some lists here. And again, it's just about focusing your time and mindset in a way that's most helpful for you. And it's okay, we're all grieving. You can go back and forth on different days, but try to keep this in mind as a framework to help you with your most precious resource, which you can't get back, and that's time.
Thanks so much, Holly. So let's see here. Would you like to stop your screen share? And okay, there we go. And so we do have a question from before, and let's shift to that for a moment and give some folks some time to think about the framework that you just presented and how it's applying to them and questions that they might have for you. The question relates to your history and all of the things that you've been involved with, primarily really that are creative. So how did you approach, or how do you think either intentionally or unintentionally you've approached blending your background of psychology and interior design to your current business and your design thinking and entrepreneurship?
Thanks so much, Cait, and thanks, Brittany. That is a very perceptive question. I love being with VCU students because you always have the most perceptive questions. And it has been a little bit unintentional, but I think that it has been a blending, maybe less intentional, because I think those topics that I was drawn to in the past, they're thematically linked to things that I'm still really drawn to. And I think that's just interesting to look back on those. But I think you're right on the money. I think that I am very interested in leadership. I'm interested in the work that I do in working with leaders and understanding the people side of everything I do. And I find that that's a way to position myself in the world of technology. And that directly comes from my interest in psychology as a way to be thinking about people at all time. And it could be consumers, it could be patients, it could be employees, but we always forget about the people side of things. And that's something that I like to keep my focus on. So I think you're exactly right, Brittany, that links to my degree. And then interior design, I think a little bit, there are some linkages there. I'll always be interested in topics of interior design, like as a hobby, but I think there are some connections to the visual aspect, the importance of environment, and the importance of creating, what I do is like service design. So I like to tie in the digital touch points of an experience to the in-person touch points of an experience, and environment really comes into that. And so that's where the interior design, I think, links in. And the thing that I learned in interior design was how much programming is important, which is understanding your user's needs. And that's a huge center point of human-centered design. So there are some really strong linkages. So thank you.
Great, thanks. So now we have a question from Giovanni about the circle of control. And really this links to motivation and applying this framework when I think in particular, a lot of our lives are turned upside down right now. We're figuring out new routines, new schedules. How do you have any recommendations on implementing this framework when maybe motivation is low, or you don't feel like that self-actualization, that top point of the pyramid is really where you are right now? How do you wrap your mind around trying to get into this? And maybe how does a routine come into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And another framework that I don't have time to go through today, but you could look it up. It's called the change curve. And it's another tool that kind of blends with the circle of control. And see, I used to have a sheet right in front of me. It kind of looks like this. And if you study the grieving process, it's very similar to the Kubler-Ross grieving process. It's kind of a corporate version of that. And it's probably very similar to, it would be a helpful, I think, framework for Giovanni and others to look at the change curve and kind of identify where they are in the change curve. And first of all, I just want to acknowledge it's really normal not to be feeling like to be feeling that you don't want to do anything right now is very normal. And it's just simply because we have an onslaught of information. We're learning new things every day. A lot of it conflicts the other information that we got, and it's confusing. And in an environment of confusion and grieving and fear and everything, it's just hard to move forward. So don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like doing anything. On the other hand, I would say that I would wish for all of us to, when we can, to start moving through the change curve, because you're moving from a situation of denial, right? We all remember when we first heard about that and we were like, oh, it's probably just like, I know for myself, I was like, it's probably just like all these others that people are talking about. It won't affect us, right? That was my first reaction. And then I had to go through all my other reactions, and it's also not linear. I can feel okay on a Tuesday and then I can feel horrible on a Wednesday. I think a lot of us are going through that. And so we're going back and forth in between the curve where we move a couple steps forward and 3 steps back. The biggest advice I would have right now, in a time when you don't feel like doing anything, is just encourage yourself to do one thing every day that is productive or moves yourself forward. And when you're done with that one thing, you can go back to everything that you want to do. But that's one of the things that I advise corporations to help move and lead through the change curve, is just focused on one. And you can even say it's one thing a week, if one thing a day is too much. But one thing that's positive, that's going to help you get to a better place. Maybe it's spending an hour on your resume. Maybe it's spending an hour on LinkedIn. Maybe it's spending an hour connecting with possibilities for an internship. Just do one thing every day or every week, and then fulfill on that commitment to yourself.
Thanks, that's great advice. And even making it time bound, setting a timer, giving some parameters so that it does feel like a bite-sized task that you can do. That's really helpful. So we have one more here before we might need to say goodbye to each other. And it is, how is human-centered design related to COVID-19? And I know you've been doing some work with this with some students in another class. What's your take on that, Holly?
That's an interesting question. Oh my gosh, I probably could spend a lot of time answering this. But I think that the connections I see between human-centered design, which is really looking at a way to solve problems that puts human beings at the center. A lot of times we solve problems, we really don't think about humans until way after the solution. We're like, wow, I wonder how this will impact people. But with human-centered design, we are actively putting the person in the center. And so I think that I don't have any answers, obviously, to where we are today, but one of the things that I think is important is to always be thinking about, what is the human reaction, whether it's the person who's working at an Amazon warehouse, or the person who has a restaurant that's not going to survive, or even the corporate person whose job is fine, but they're at home with 3 kids climbing all over them. Part of it is just trying to understand and empathize with what is the variety of human beings, what are they experiencing during this time, and then how are they going to come out of this? So it's really just kind of using that as the lens through any scenario. And COVID is one of those that's really interesting to think about, what people's individual experiences might be across the spectrum of what we read about and hear about happening. And just as an example, I love to do social listening or ethnography by looking at social media. So a lot of times I'll look at different things that people are posting and saying, either have had the virus or are experiencing a tangential impact. And I'll look at the words that they use and the stories that they tell as a way to leverage human-centered design and be curious about the experience.
I don't know if you've seen it, but there's WTVR, the local CBS 6 station, just did a piece featuring the Valentine's working with elementary and high school students and getting their take on their experience right now. So that could be another perspective to throw in there.
I didn't see that, so I'll check that out. Thanks, Cait.
Yeah. So Holly, thanks so much for joining us. I feel like we could go on for a lot longer. Our time is up right now. So you can reach Holly, connect with Holly on LinkedIn, on our BizConnect platform. You can also expect a recording of this session to come through tomorrow, and with a brief feedback form. We love your feedback as we continue these virtual sessions. We are constantly evaluating and making improvements on the fly. And we'll also include the resources that Holly mentioned. So her LinkedIn article, we'll throw in there the change curve, and I'll also add the local news piece. So thanks again. We hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Chip away at, find something to chip away at to improve yourself. And we'll continue this on Wednesday, and then for the rest of the month on Mondays and Mentoring Mondays and Wellness Wednesdays. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you. Bye-bye.